Minor League Podcast. I'm your host, Savannah Robinson, joined here with my co-host, Blu Robinson.
Man, I love being in the studio with you.
Me as well. We haven't done one of these in so long, and we need to, because I always hear new messages from Mom that people love them. So
absolutely. We have a new listener that's been checking out the podcast and only came because of the Minor League Podcast. So
how sweet. I love it.
Yeah. Well, Savannah, take us away. It's been a minute since we've been in here. Last time you were talking about relationships, and we've had some deep conversations about growth and that kind of stuff. And I think it lines right up with what you've presented today. So let's give these listeners a little bit of what's coming up.
Okay, so today our topic is on growing up. I feel like this has been such a prominent idea in my life over the past not even couple weeks, but months. Now that I've hit senior year of high school, all I can think about is growing up in the future and how time just flew by. I mean, the other day I was overhearing Mom talk to our neighbors about, we had some old neighbors come visit, and they're talking about how me and her son, who are the same age, they remember us sharing popsicles and jumping on the back tramp. And I just remember sobbing in my room because I was like, oh my gosh, now we're both seniors and 18, gonna graduate soon. And I just wanted to cry.
Wait until you hit the ripe old age of 45, 46, 47. You'll be like, wow, those were the days. Because time just has a funny way of moving forward, doesn't it?
It's so funny. It's so fast, and you don't even realize.
Well, when you first started this podcast, I think you had just turned 16. I think you were 15 moving to 16. And it's
right there.
Exactly. It's moving fast, isn't it?
It is. And it's so sad, but it's also so much fun. So I wanted to talk about growing up today. And this time I have something a little special because I also asked on my Instagram story for some questions you guys have on growing up. And so we're going to address some of those too, because now I have my dad here to help. So
wow.
Yeah.
You've done some research and planning for this. I'm kind of blown away.
We're a little set up. Okay. So growing up means that there's a lot of changes, especially in our teenage life. And I think a lot of kids my age have started to feel like we're not doing enough. I had a conversation with my friends the other day, and we all just sat at my friend's dinner table crying because we were talking about how college is coming up and we don't have ideas for future and all this. And as I'm sitting there, I realized that everyone was getting so upset because they felt like they weren't doing enough. And that was so weird for me to hear, because I'm looking at these 3 friends and I'm thinking, wow, one of my friends is an amazing athlete with running. And I have another friend who's an amazing soccer player. I have another friend who is the funniest guy in the world. And he goes to the gym all the time. And all of these people are not only super athletic, but they're super smart. And they've been doing so well in high school. And as I'm sitting here and they're telling me that they don't feel like they're doing enough, I felt so bad because I've seen how much they're doing, but I feel that way too. I get in my own little headspace where I don't feel like I'm doing enough for my future, my life. And you've seen it recently, how stressed I get over the little things. So I think that with how much is on our plate, it gets really hard to kind of find that balance. So I wanted to talk a little bit first on the idea of prioritizing. I think that's where you can find yourself to slow down a little bit, to focus and see how much you're actually doing. I have a really hard time prioritizing what comes first because my ADHD is just like yours, and all this, I just overbook myself so fast, and then I can't meet all these expectations, or I can't get everything done. And then I just sit back and I feel like I didn't do everything, and there's so much more I need to be doing, or I end the day feeling like I didn't complete everything I wanted to. And that's not the case, because I still went a full 24, 12 hours, whatever, doing so many little things. So I wanted to talk about prioritizing. What do you think? Why do you think prioritizing is so important, especially for teenagers?
I think because most people screw it up, Savannah. I'll be honest with you. I see this a lot in addiction recovery. I see it a lot with relationships with husbands and wives and partner. I see a lot of really backwards thinking when it comes to prioritizing, because we all have these priority lists, right?
Yeah.
And the funny thing about priority lists are, I'll ask people maybe every time this subject comes up to list me their top 5 priorities. And they'll say things like, well, it's my career, it's my family, it's my church, it's my connections with the community.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is they never put themselves on their priority list.
Never.
They never do.
I do that all the time. I will always sit there and list and be like, okay, school, family, friends, relationships, everything. And I have a really hard time remembering that maybe I need to be the top of the list.
Well, think about that for a minute. Now, I like to kind of demonstrate with my own priority list. And I'll say, well, where do you land on this? I'm like, well, no, I'm up there on the top. I'm like, okay, well, where? And then they still put themselves 3rd or 4th down on that rung of the ladder, right?
Yeah.
So I said, well, if you don't mind, I'll share you my priority list. And I'll say my number 1 priority in all my existence is my relationship with God.
Yeah.
I have to have him be my focus, my North Star, so to speak, because if I can be accountable to something bigger than me and something that brings me this level ground, this level footing, that to me means that I'm going to be okay no matter what.
Yeah.
Second on my priority list is me.
Exactly.
Which is crazy, right? Because you're like, what, Dad? What, you high and mighty? Like, no, man. And the reason why is because I have to have that conscious relationship with that higher power to keep me accountable so that I'm not, out lying and cheating and stealing and doing stupid things, right? And so if I'm number 2 and God's number 1, that means Mom's number 3.
Yeah.
She's third on my list.
Exactly.
Don't tell her that. But she's third on my list.
It's a good place for her to be.
Because if I'm not okay with me and if I'm not okay with God, then what kind of husband am I going to be for her?
Yeah.
Guess where you guys come in?
4th.
In no particular order. 4th, 5th, 6th, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes like right now we got Brooklyn who just got back from a surgery. So she's climbed up on that list. So she's got more of a priority. You're on autopilot. You're rocking it.
Yeah.
But you still have stuff. So you're right there. And it doesn't really matter, but you guys kind of intershift and all that kind of stuff. So you take that 4th position and change in and out because there's times you need us and there's times you don't. And because you guys have learned that's kind of, I hope that's how we've prioritized this. That I hope you've felt that, like you've never been without or like overlooked or whatnot. But then I start saying, okay, so who's down on the bottom, right? Then it's like extended family, and then my athletes, and then my clients. My clients I see, they're way down on my list.
Yeah.
So when and I've had this happen just recently, Savannah, I had an athlete that said, hey, I was super disappointed in you because you weren't able to come up to see me at this event that you were going to. And it was the weekend that we all decided, like last kind of week of summer, we're all going to Lagoon.
Oh, yeah.
And I've always told you guys, no matter what, family
comes first.
And you've called me out on that, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sorry that you're disappointed, but my family will always come first. You know this. Yeah. I will drop everything for the family because you guys are 4th on my list.
Yeah.
Right? Does that make sense?
Exactly.
So does that give a little bit of feedback?
It does. And so teens and parents, especially parents, if you're listening, it's really important to understand that you need to come first before your teenagers too. I have to understand that too with my parents, that I can't always be, like he's saying, the top of their priority list. I need to be on it, but I cannot be the top because they can't be a good parent to me if they're not putting themselves first. And that goes the same hand in hand for teenagers. Kids out there, if you guys aren't putting yourselves first, how are you going to have a good relationship with your friends, with boyfriends and girlfriends? How are you going to have a good relationship with teachers? All that, if you can't have all of this for yourself, you need to have yourself first. And so that kind of is why that's the first thing I wanted to touch on with slowing down and realizing what you're doing is prioritizing. Mm-hmm. After you put yourself first, then go in and list what comes next and what you can work on. I know I've had so many conversations with friends and family and whatever where they're getting overwhelmed and we sit down and talk about it. And I've always used the list of priorities and they're like, well, I need to get this and I need it because I have to do this with myself. Mm-hmm. So guilty. But I have to sit down and be like, hey, I have all these assignments and all of these people who want to do stuff. What comes first? And sometimes it's some things due that day and that has to come first, whether I want to go with friends or not. Or sometimes, you know what, this assignment's not due till next week and these people are more important to me right now, so I'll go with them. But it does take a little bit of focusing and adjusting to figure that out.
Well, yeah. If you think about it too, though, you have to also understand that there are a lot of relationships with things that we got to prioritize, right? We have relationships with family and friends. We have relationships with coworkers and bosses and teachers and all that. But we also have relationships and priorities with things as well.
Yeah.
Cars and computers and phones. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so if you're prioritizing so much time on your phone and you have a deep relationship with that, social media connection, can you see how your whole priority list can get messed up?
Exactly.
So you have to be able to identify those things. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. All right. The next thing I wanted to talk about was what are the stresses of now and what are the stresses of the future? Because this is something I get mixed up all the time. I sit here and I stress about things that aren't even close to happening, whereas there's probably day-to-day stresses. And sometimes I get so overwhelmed in the future stresses that I'm not even focusing on what's stressing me out now. And stress is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. It can be really motivating and it can be helpful, but there is another side of it where you kind of make up those stresses for yourself. We've talked about this all the time. Stress isn't really it doesn't just naturally come certain emotions. It's something you kind of create in your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to be mindful about what's causing the stress is key, which is hard because most people think if I think about it, then it's going to be. What that's called, Savannah, is anxiety.
Yeah.
So stress about future, and you start doing that, turns into anxiety. It's worries and concerns about stuff that hasn't happened. And that can wreak havoc on you. I mean, stress releases this hormone in our body called cortisol. And cortisol is a negative response to stress. And so everyone that gets under stress starts having humongous health issues because cortisol will kind of attach itself to parts of your body. Like, let's say, like for me, like it's the heart, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, and really, when I'm really stressed, it's my lower back. Remember that time when you got your neck way on a whack and you had to go to the chiropractor and stuff?
My back was hurting, my neck was hurting.
If you were to take a stress analysis, you're going through a lot at that time.
Yeah.
So that's where you code your stress too. So if we don't process that stuff and we don't kind of like do our best to make sense of it, and then to say, what can I control? What can't I control? And then, have a growth mindset, which is that urgency is not my urgency right now.
Yeah.
You will fall victim to anxiety and fall under the pressure of stress.
I know a lot of you are probably going to ask, well, then how do I deal with that stress? Here's my favorite thing my parents have taught me always. And I think about this every single time. We always work our right and left brains. My dad always says that the best way to process anything, stress, like depression, anxiety, anything, is working your right to left brain. So that's writing, that's running, that's walking. Anything that's moving is working your right and left brain, and it's processing all of those emotions. So if you're ever in a really stressful situation, go for a 10-minute walk. That's going to help you process it. As silly as that sounds, do it. Write something down, even if you don't like writing. It's going to help you process that for just a second so you can clear your mind and figure out what you need to focus on.
Absolutely. In fact, if anyone's going through any of these kind of future tripping things, go for a walk and just go until you feel it release. And there's a little thing you want to do while you do that, Savannah, and that's, what do I believe about this situation? Well, I believe that I'm not going to have the capacity to overcome it or to get through it. And then you say, what would I rather believe? That I am capable, that I can come to solutions, and that an opportunity or a situation or answer will present itself. And as you're walking, every time that negative thought process pops up, you just say, no, because I know that an opportunity is going to. Does it make sense?
Exactly. Yeah.
And after a while, it will slip. It'll leave, and you'll have this aha moment of like, okay, one bite at a time is how I'm going to take this on.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Okay, yeah. So going along with this, I always focus on, it's hard to focus on the present, not the future. My friend Zach always quotes, what's it called? Kung Fu Panda, where he was like, he's like, yesterday, what is it called? I gotta think about it.
You better look it up.
I know.
Because I know what you're talking about.
I know it. I just want to quote it right.
What I teach the athletes and some of my clients is going for the win, W-I-N. Learned it from Coach Larry Gelwex. He talks about what's important now. And that's kind of a cool thing, but like, it's hard to do that. But if you can focus on what's most important now, you're gonna win.
Yeah, here's the quote that my friend Zach always tells us. He always says, yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery, and today is the present. Today's a gift. That's why they call it the present. And I love that one. And he always he'll just throw that little one-liner in every once in a while. And we always kind of giggle because it's from Kung Fu Panda. But if you think about it, it really is. We can't, another quote, oh my goodness, I love it all the time. Where is it? I have it in here. We might have to cut something.
No, you're fine. Because my favorite one that I know that you're a fan of is Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right?
Oh, yeah.
Life moves pretty fast. Right?
Yeah, sometimes we don't slow down and look around once in a while.
You're going to miss it. Yep. When I came home one day, I think I was doing the bishop thing. I came home one day and I knew I had achieved good parenting because I came downstairs and you guys were all watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off and you were just little kids. And I'm like, absolutely awesome. But life moves pretty fast. If you don't slow down and take a look around, you're going to miss it.
You're going to miss it. Yeah. All right. So going along with this whole idea of getting too stuck in the future or growing up, all of it, my mom told me this 3-4 years ago, and I think about it all the time. So every time I get really stressed about what I'm doing and if it's enough, she always reminds me that if we're lucky enough to live a full lifetime, let's just take an average and say 80, 90, 100. Right here, right now, at 16, 17, 18, we're not even a quarter through our life. I mean, you're not even at half of your life.
No.
Yet. So if you really look at it, although it looks like, wow, we're not doing enough or I need to be doing all this, we're not even a quarter way through our life. So we have so much more time than we think. And I've found that to be like really calming when I look at that perspective and be like, oh my gosh, I have so much more time here.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this happens a lot right now. And I've noticed this big shift in kind of like, even pursuits. That's why I think there's times when I look at you and I think, what egg did you come from? Because you really are future oriented as it comes to, you want to make sure that you can position yourself to do a job, a career that you love, that you're passionate about, that you're going to be able to put in the hard work now to have easy later.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we've also never pushed any of you guys to like push yourselves that hard. This is something that's coming from inside you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Savannah, slow down.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to clip the wings that you've got for yourself because you're creating them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because you don't, and I think I told you this yesterday. While we were eating breakfast, I said, you have until 30 to make any of the big decisions.
Life decision. Yeah.
But the thing is like, I know you and your mindset is that you don't want to waste it.
Yeah.
But all in the same breath, it's like, go at your speed. Don't run faster than you have the ability. And I think you're doing that. Sometimes it takes a minute to stop and take a breath and then keep going.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I put that perspective on just like how much time we actually have, it makes it easier to understand that like one bad grade or one bad test or one bad morning or one failed conversation or one failed relationship or whatever isn't going to define the rest of your life. I mean, really though, if we're not even a quarter way through our life, we're going to look back at all this and be like not even remember half the little things we went through.
Well, because if you think about it, Savannah, and some people out there might be thinking, well, yeah, but you don't know. You could get hit by a truck tomorrow. And that is true.
You could.
That is true. But there's no way you're going to cram in all of life's existence every day on the anticipation of I could not be here tomorrow. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Exactly. So just do what makes you feel good for that day.
Well, you remember we used to do this a lot, and it would be like we would be driving or even outside. We're like, everybody come here, or we'd pull over and like, look at that sunset.
Yeah.
Why do you think we did that?
Because if we never saw it the next day, I mean, we wouldn't have realized how good it was. Or
Absolutely.
Like, we got to take in those little moments. That's why coming up here, one of my favorite quotes from the book is The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Mm-hmm. And I quote it at the end of every episode. I always say, there are no ordinary moments, because there aren't. But the line that comes right before that one in the book is, the time is now, the place is here. You can do nothing to change the past, and the future will never come exactly as you hope for. The time is now and the place is here. That's such a powerful line, because truly the time is now and the place is here. Like we can't worry about the past. It's already happened. And like it's saying, the future's never going to come as exactly as we hope for. We can't have this tedious little timed out existence of what's going to happen in the future. We just have to let it happen. And so although we can do things now, especially in our teenagehood, to really set up a good future for ourselves, we can't exactly like create what's going to happen. We can't see what exact outcome's going to happen. I mean, for example, I've been working so hard all of my high school year to get really good grades, and I really haven't seen a lot of payoff other than I feel good about myself when I end each term with good grades. And it wasn't until I had a conversation about my scholarships a couple weeks ago, and she told me that like most of my scholarships get to come from my GPA. And that was the first time I really slowed down and was like, wow, my work is paying off. I knew it was going to be good for something, but I didn't know what. I just knew it would be beneficial to be working really hard. And so to see that pay off for the first time in like 3-4 years was so like exhilarating and exciting for me, but also like such a like slow down moment of like, wow, I'm doing great. And that's all I need to be doing right now. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what that sets up for my future. As much as all this is happening, like, yeah, me working really hard sets up for a future, but it doesn't explain every detail of my future.
Exactly. But that's the thing too, though, is most people don't allow themselves to go through the intensity of the repetition of the work. Does that make sense? We want instant gratification. I see this a lot in the people I work with in addiction is they use the substance because they want immediate relief from what they're feeling. They're not willing or used to being able to push through the hard stuff for that reward at the end. And a lot of times, no one sees it. You have to be your own cheerleader. And that's not easy, right?
Yeah.
But it's, again, it's like kind of what Dan says in his book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. The journey is what brings happiness, not the destination. Mm-hmm. The destination is great, but what have you learned along the way for that? I mean, I've watched you come unglued, but I've also watched you do things that I would have never dreamed to do. Question a teacher about like, hey, I got, didn't get enough points on this. What can I do?
Yeah.
Or like, you are a problem solver. And I would never ask for help because I'm like, I just want to keep my head low and not be seen. Or you're like, excuse me?
I get
Like,
made fun of
I
all
am
the time for
here.
those little things.
Yeah.
But it's worth
Where
it.
the crud did that come? Because I didn't teach you that. That's something that I'm sure mom kind of instilled in you, like, hey, go talk. But it's also something like you started to do. Why in the world would you just not settle?
I mean, I had a conversation with Max the other day about this. We were talking about it because I'm helping him finish up all of his term stuff. And he was like, I have a B. Like, that's great. Like, I could be done. And I looked at it and he had one 25-point assignment, and we can check our grades where you can put in a score and it'll see what you get. And there's one 24-point assignment. It's going to take maybe an hour at the most. And it would bring him to a 99%. So I looked at him and I was like, why wouldn't you take 30 more minutes to get a 99%? Like, you can give your best, so why wouldn't you give your best?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, well, it's going to take a lot of time. I was like, okay, well, you don't think that way during soccer. Like, you don't go to a soccer game when you're about to play and be like, oh, I'm only going to play half my best today. Like, you know, you can give your all, so why wouldn't you? That's how I look at school. And I think a lot of you guys can relate to that with certain things. If you're in a sport or like just something you're passionate about, if you have the ability to give your best, why wouldn't you? You're not going to go into that and just give half of it. Like, if you're going into a relationship, you're not going to give half your best to that person. You want to give them your whole, and you have the ability to, so why wouldn't you? So like, if I have the resources and the people around me to help me do my best and give my best and perform at my best, why wouldn't I use all of those? You know, it makes it easier for me. So that's always how I've kind of viewed school is I have the teachers, I have the work, I have all these, especially nowadays with every chat GPT, whatever out there, I have so many good different ways to make assignments so much easier and that I can perform at my best. So I'm going to give it my all.
Yeah, see, and that I think is the answer to the final. That is a huge component to being, I think, invested in yourself versus feeling less than because everybody else is trying to put you into a certain category. Does that make sense? Like, I never had that mindset, which is, you know, at any means at my disposal, will I find what I need? Because I didn't trust myself, let alone anybody else, to give me the answers. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I felt like a tumbleweed where you're like, oh no, I'm very much, I'm very much entrenched. I'm doing this for me. I like that.
I love it. All right. So kind of to finish off here, I asked on my Instagram, like I said at the beginning, a couple questions that people had about the future that either they just stressed about themselves or didn't really want to bring up to a parent or whatever. So most of the questions I received were about finances and like the future expenses and how does that all work out? And my favorite quote from you is what?
Man, Sven, I get so many.
Money always comes and goes.
Money does. It always comes and it always goes. And I learned that from I learned that at a young age. It was kind of funny. It was a buddy of mine, and you know, he's like, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to go with you guys. I think they're doing Lagoon or something.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know what? Don't worry. Money always comes. He's like, you'll find a way. It'll just happen. And it does.
It does.
It really does. I mean, sometimes we have to
doesn't mean there's
save
not gonna be
here.
tough spots.
Yeah, absolutely. But when we start getting in that scarcity mindset and we start like holding on to stuff, what happens?
Then you're just not going to be living anymore because you're going to be so worried on one little thing it's in your control, but it doesn't have to be like the only thing you think about or focus on or put your energy towards. Like money can be a really stressful thing. I mean, I even know nowadays with how much I'm making, like I make a lot more than you guys made when you were kids and I still, but inflation and everything, I'm still not making enough that I would want to be at to afford like a new car, but like, I know it's going to come. And my car right now works great as much as I'd want a new one. I don't need to focus on only my money and only my income because I need this new thing. Like, no, that's just going to keep me from living my life. I'd be focused on only ever working and I wouldn't be having all these other things in my life.
But I think you also understand the principle behind like, you're not going to like hide from it, if that makes sense. Like it's going to come. You're not going to like people right now say, oh, I'll never be able to afford a house in this market. When you have that mindset, guess what's going to happen?
It's going to close you down from that market. You're never going to get one. You got to keep it a little open.
It may be a struggle. It may be hard, but guess what?
It'll be possible.
It's possible, but we don't think that. Again, our brains are geared towards seeing what's wrong instead of seeing what's right. And it takes a lot of work to be able to train your mind to see the positive in even the most negative circumstance.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. The next question was asked a lot was about moving and the idea of losing friends and growing. Like, I know I have a lot of friends who just graduated and went to college, and a lot of them moved all over the place. And I think now, just having conversations with my friends, we're all going different places, and a lot of them are really nervous about the idea of moving.
Mhm.
You've moved how many times?
22 times before I was 18, so I'm used to
he
it.
understands.
Mhm.
What's the best advice you can give about moving and losing friends?
It's about where you are and who you are. Like, you've got to be connected with you. To thine own self be true. It's a classic Shakespeare,
Yeah.
which means no matter where you go, there you are. And I think we forget about that. But the funny thing, you bring this up and it sounds funny. This is a little bit long, but this plays right into what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's going to answer that question.
Okay.
This is, again, and I'm so glad you brought up Dan Millman's The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, because it really is a book that I love.
Same.
And this is when Socrates is talking to Dan. And he asks, where are you right now? Right here, today, where are you? And eagerly, Dan says, I started to think about to myself, however, I noticed that I was getting sidetracked with a bunch of answers, but still, he would not let me shift down of it. I was feeling very, very drawn towards his question, but didn't want to answer it because I knew I might answer it wrong. Very well, he said. You don't know where you are? Look around. Do you remember? Yes, I remember where I am. Well, tell me. He says, okay, I'm in an office. And Socrates says, where's that? And Dan says, in a gas station. And Socrates says, where's that? In Berkeley. Where's Berkeley? In California. Where's California? In the United States. Our landmass, one of the continents in the Western Hemisphere. Socrates said, where are the continents? I sighed, on the Earth. Are we done yet? Socrates responded, where's the Earth? In the solar system, third planet from the sun. The sun is a small star in the Milky Way galaxy. All right. Socrates says, where's the Milky Way? Oh, brother, Dan sighed, impatiently rolling his eyes. In the universe. I sat back, crossed my arms with final victory, when Socrates smiled and said, is the universe? He said, the universe is, well, where is it, Dan? The universe is, well, I don't know. How do I answer that? Socrates says this, that is the point. You cannot answer it, and you never will. There is no knowing about it. You are ignorant of where the universe is, and thus where you are. In fact, you have no knowledge of anything that is about where you are or where we could go. Life is a mystery. My ignorance is based on this understanding. Your understanding is based on ignorance. In general, this is why I am a humorous fool and you are a serious jackass. What was Socrates trying to teach Dan?
He doesn't know everything. He doesn't need to know everything. It's not important to know where the universe is because it's not.
Why even worry about it, right?
Yeah, like our day-to-day lives, we're on a floating rock. And
so you take that and you zoom it down into wherever you are, right? You may not know exactly where you're going or where you're at, but what you do is you know who you are. And you got to understand that ignorance about like not knowing where I am doesn't mean that you don't know
what's
like
next?
Who you are.
Yeah.
The ignorance. And so I think the whole concept of being able to just be yourself and be willing to, create relationships. That's why we've always told you, it's like when we moved from Orem to Springville, you left a lot of friends.
Yeah.
And I remember that was a really hard thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you came here, your personality, your mindset, everything remained the same. So it wasn't hard for you.
No.
I remember you talking about this like with one of our neighbors in Orem. Her name was Lindy Jenkins.
Oh.
And you said, Lindy Jenkins is one of the most sweetheartedest, kindest people I've ever met. Simply because she did what?
She was just always herself and just authentically her,
Mm-hmm.
no matter who she was with. It didn't I always felt so validated because I was so much younger than her, but she would talk to me the same way she would talk to my parents, the same way she would talk to members of the ward, her friends. And it felt so validating because that was just who she was.
Mm-hmm. And I think you've used that same approach to invest in people. So in order to be okay with where you are, you've got to be okay with who you are.
Yeah, which goes back to what we started with growing up. It's okay to not understand right now. We're not going to understand everything about ourselves and who we are, but just start with prioritizing yourself. And that's going to make everything about the future and what comes next and who comes next so much easier to just not only attain, but just understand.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love it.
So guys, in summary, growing up shouldn't be scary. It's going to take a while. You have so much time here. So focus on the now and what you're doing on your day-to-day basis, and understand that, like we're saying, no matter where you're at, as long as you're content with who you are, you're going to be just fine.
And I'll take one more olive branch of peacemaking for parents that might not have the best relationship with their kids, and say, sit down and start talking with them.
Yeah.
Be able to have these kind of conversations. And you've got to present yourself with a growth mindset again and an open heart, so that you can hear. I mean, there's been times when, and I've talked about this on the Addict to Athlete podcast as well, Savannah, that, I've had to shut my mouth and listen to you guys. And I've invited you to make those decisions at times. And so when you voice your concerns, what good would it have been if I would have been, like, hey, again, Matilda, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm big, you're little. It's one of the coolest things when you can have the relationship that, I guess, puts you in a position of knowing that no matter what, you've been there. Like, you are connected. And it doesn't matter if you're estranged from your children. It doesn't matter if there's anger they need you, and they want to hear from you. And so even if it's a challenge and a struggle, go back and listen to some of these minor leaguer podcasts. In fact, I almost hate to say this, but this could quite possibly be your last minor league podcast, because next month
I'm 18.
You're 18.
Got to change the name or something.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll call it Words of Wisdom or something. I don't know. But nonetheless, man, I think it was great topic, and I appreciate you getting some thoughts from the folks that you're hanging out with. You got a good group of kids. And they're going to be, I mean, a lot of times we think, the follies of youth will create the leadership in the future. No, we're in good hands. They've got some good stuff happening. So well done.
Smart individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. You can find us on every platform. And if you guys need any extra help outside of these podcasts, you can find us at addictathlete.org. Yeah, I think that's it. So as always, there are no ordinary moments.